Good afternoon, everyone. So happy to welcome Sean Kent back from Mass Audubon. I think this is your third time here.
Third or fourth.
Third or fourth. And
Yeah.
we're definitely going to keep having you back because we love these presentations. And Sean put together a special presentation for us today on maple sugaring because it's that time of year.
Yeah.
So I'll hand it over to you. I'll put this back carefully. Just as a reminder, as always, Walpole Media is here filming today. So if you do have a question, just raise your hand and Sean can either bring the microphone over or repeat the question so we can make sure we can capture it on tape. All right, have fun, everyone.
Okay.
All right, there you go.
Thanks.
Sean.
So, thank you. I'm really excited to be here again, and I'm also excited for this because this is the first time I've been asked to give a talk on sugar maples and maple syrup, so this is the first time I've ever done this here, and it was really fun putting it together. But my name is Sean Kent, and I work for Mass Audubon, and I run the education programs for what's called Mass Audubon's Metro South region. And what that is, that consists of Moose Hill Wildlife Sanctuary in Sharon, so that's about 10 minutes away. The Stony Brook Wildlife Sanctuary in Norfolk, which is an incredible 250-acre wetland with really beautiful trails, 10 or 15 minutes away down Route 1. And then the Blue Hills Trailside Museum, so that's the small zoo with rehabilitated animals over in Milton, right at the base of Great Blue Hill, and the Museum of American Bird Art in Canton there as well. And I'm also a field biologist, so I'm going to connect like maple syrup and sugar maples to kind of like also what's going on around us and how that can really be helpful for birds and other wildlife and stuff there to give you a better picture of this. And so this picture just at the start here, this is a sugar maple or a red maple, both of which they collect maple sap from in the fall. So also remember like with the fall colors and everything there. And right before I got here, I was over at the Moose Hill Wildlife Sanctuary in Sharon, and I'll go through the whole maple sap and maple syrup and sugaring season as we're going along, but there's a large maple sugar operation at Moose Hill that's going on right now. There's a very specific time of year. It's that kind of the freeze-thaw cycle that we're in right now when the maple sap is going to run and be collected and then be boiled down and turned into maple syrup, and that, you know, anywhere between 3 and 7 weeks in this kind of like, it's cold at night, a little warmer during the day when the sap runs, and I'll talk about that. So right now at Moose Hill, and I just want to kind of walk through this, we're collecting maple sap as we speak, and I was just out on the program, and these are old, this picture is of two 250, 300-year-old sugar maple trees that are on the Moose Hill property. There's approximately 250 sugar maple trees and some red maple trees that can be tapped that are there as well. And these buckets, which I'll also talk about, they're drilled into there's a small drill hole into the tree about 2 inches or so. And when the nights are cold, below freezing, the sap will freeze in the tree. And then when it warms up during the day, it will basically run and it'll start to fill up these buckets right through there. And that's this kind of process. So we do educational programs around maple syrup and maple sap collection. And then next weekend on Saturday and Sunday, we have a large maple sugar, maple sap, maple syrup festival that'll be running with about 500, 600 people coming through. And please stop and ask questions when you have them. Yep.
Does maple syrup go bad?
So if we left, so the maple...
Does it go bad when you take it and you store it?
So the question is does the maple sap, in this case, go bad? So if you leave it out for more than a day or two, it can potentially start to mold because of the natural yeast and fungus in there.
Bad, honey.
Yes. Well, the maple, when you get it down to the syrup, it's not going to go bad. It's going to be stable at that point when it's in there. But when it's just in the sap form, it can go bad because there's going to be bacteria and natural fungus.
It turns to black, but it's still good.
Yeah. Yep.
But the pharaohs in Egypt, that's why they used to they used it like honey.
Mm-hmm.
Way back centuries ago.
Yeah, and temples
that are like 20,000 years old,
Mhm.
and the honey is still there, but it's black, but
Mhm.
you can still eat it.
Yes, honey will do that. And so what we also have there is some educational programs. This is my daughter Jo, and she's drilling into the tree for the maple sap right here. And then I'm going to go through this whole process there, and there's something called a style that you put in there, and you tap it in, you can see the maple syrup actually already running out right through there. And then you're putting the bucket on there to collect it, and she's getting a close look at the drips going in right through there. And you can see where it's dripping in right through here at Moose Hill there as well, into the buckets.
How deep just a
I'll show that in a little bit, but it's about 1.5 inches. Yeah, it's about 1.5 inches. And then here's our sugar shack at Moose Hill through here. So there's a property manager named Vin. He's incredible, and also a lot of volunteers. They'll collect the sap from the buckets, and there's also another system where we actually have tubes connected directly into the trees, and they run into larger collecting things. And it's brought here, and it's put into an evaporator. It's actually being boiled off here, and you're boiling off the syrup, the sap, because it's mostly water, down to a much higher concentrated sugar solution. And I'll go through that whole process in a little bit here, but I just want to kind of show you the whole process here. And then here it's being bottled into the bottle right here. And then here's maple syrup in its natural habitat in front of the sugar maple tree. And here it is in a more refined habitat on the tables right through here. But what I want to do is show you those pictures to start off with, and then explain it as we're going along. So just really brief, they've been doing about 40 years maple sugaring at Moose Hill. 10 years ago, there was about 10 gallons produced of maple syrup. And this past year, before the pandemic year, we had 76 gallons produced from 250 taps, and I'll talk about that, with over 5,000 gallons of maple sap. So you can see the difference, 76 gallons versus 5,000 gallons. So you're collecting tons and tons of basically sugar water from the trees, boiling that down to get the maple sap. And there's about 400 tappable sugar maple trees at Moose Hill that we use the buckets that you saw, and then I'm going to show the tubing system there. And thousands and thousands of people come each year to kind of learn about it through here. But where I want to kind of then take a step back, and you can see it really well just along the bike trail right here too, is I want you to start thinking about, instead of just the sugar maple trees that you're getting the sap from, and you can also tap other trees like beeches and birches and a few other ones there as well, but we'll focus on sugar maples because that's where the primary comes. I want you to start thinking of the forest and the environment that we're in and the time of the year. So kind of this season between February and March where you've got the, warmer days, cooler nights, and specifically when I say warmer, it's above freezing, so the sap will thaw and melt and then start to run through the trees, and I'll go through that process through there. But I want to think of the entire forest and frame it with looking at the entire forest and the ecology there. So in our New England forest, and it's a very similar forest to areas out here that are a little bit wetter, like the hardwood forest where you've got your oaks, you've got your maples through here. There's going to be sugar maples down here, red maples. I've seen it on walks here. But they're really important for like the water going through the entire system, moving water through the entire system, capturing carbon, storing carbon. So when I say carbon, that's just like carbon dioxide in the air turns into sugar, but that's, that what helps make the structures in the trees. That's what the birds are eating and moving all that around. And the key thing that I want you to think about this whole time is different species of trees, shrubs, and plants kind of all living and working together. So that's what I mean, a diversity of tree, shrub, and understory plant species. So in here, don't just think about the sugar maple that's in this picture. Think about the pines, but also think about the high bush blueberries and the other plants that are in there and go through that. Because these ecosystems and these forest ecosystems, they provide a lot of important things for us. So like the maple syrup, like with pancakes and like what you're eating it on is really important too, but there's also lumber involved with that. But especially you can see it right here, and you can see it a lot with the storms that are coming through. That's really important for water filtration and water runoff, capturing the water before it gets into the streets through there, kind of grabbing the carbon or filtering the pollution through the leaves so that is not as high there as well too. And then think of how beautiful this is. I took people on walks here this fall of when the fall colors are changing, the forest colors that are coming through there, but also there's the whole process of making the maple sugar, historically, that whole kind of like you start to feel the seasonal, the season starting to change. It's a kind of that really nice cultural marker or barrier. But, just in the Boston region, there's over 500 million gallons of water that don't run off because of the forest that we have in eastern Massachusetts. they're removing almost a million tons of carbon in the air, and they're removing millions of pounds of air pollution, air pollutants that are in the air too. And then the wetlands that are on the forest edges are storing 1 million gallons of water, as opposed to, for every for every 1 acre of wetlands. And stuff like that can be really important too. Just if you think down the street in Norwood, when the road flooded here after like an afternoon rainstorm, and it's the emergency room still shut down through there. So you think of the forest ecosystems in that case there as well too. But what I want to again kind of tie back into, especially since we're going, with wonderful birds and migration and sugar mapling here, is I just want you to think of, these are all pictures that I took. I've taken most of these pictures. These pictures I took last spring as well, and these are all birds that'll be in Walpole here. But here's a small little warbler called a black and white warbler. The other one on this side that's a Carolina wren. At the end, if you want to hear its song, I heard it as I was walking in here, so you'll hear this bird here. But I want you to just kind of think of the forest along with the sugar maples here, and thinking about all different species of trees, shrubs, and plants. Think about that when you're looking. This is a sugar maple grove right here. And then again, kind of think about, all the structure. Like here are some sugar maples there. Those are the taller trees. But think of everything else that's in those pictures there. And as we're looking at this, and when you're looking at this and the kind of the role, and this is going to tie right back into maple syrup, I promise. There's lots of downed trees and decaying wood. There's white pines, red maples, and oaks. So those are the taller trees that you're seeing in this picture. This is actually a picture from my wildlife sanctuary in Canton at the Museum of Evaporator. And this is a vernal pool right on a trail. It's a really lovely place to go for a walk. So I can talk about all the plants in there and the birds that live there. There's lots of leaves on the ground, ferns, flowering plants. There's also lots of shrubs that are in there. So the blueberries, the maple leaf viburnums, black cherries, but it's really really complex. And the reason I want you to think about that is the down and decaying wood, for example, people kind of might want to remove that a lot. But here's a picture of a chickadee that I took. And chickadees act like woodpeckers in the springtime. And you can see the wood chips that are in its mouth right there. It's actually excavating that, and it's going to nest there. And the chickadees nest right in the same trees in this picture right through here. The Carolina wren on the bottom, it plays around, well, it doesn't play around, but it moves around in the shrubs all the time because it's eating insects and eating a lot of things that are actually living in that decaying wood that's fallen down right through there. Here's a picture. This is a picture of a barred owl, and you definitely have these along the trail right through here. And this is a picture that I took right next to the vernal pool last spring, and you can actually see the sugar maple leaves coming out in the picture. I didn't plan that, but it works out really well. And then in that same pond, and if you look behind it, we've got snow on the ground right now. Here's a frog that's out in the snow. This can actually fills its whole body up with sugar, believe it or not, in the winter time, so it doesn't freeze. It fills its heart up with sugar. It fills its liver up with sugar. It fills its blood vessels up with sugar. You ever freeze a Pepsi can or some type of Pepsi and it's kind of all like, it doesn't freeze completely. So it basically fills itself out with antifreeze, goes right below the leaves, freezes completely solid in the winter time, doesn't breathe, the heart doesn't beat for a few months. Right when it's warm enough to come out, it comes out, and the owl's then eating them. And then it's also going to the vernal pools. They quack like ducks through there. But the reason I have this picture up here with maple sugar, as well as I want you to think of the whole ecosystem with the sugar maples and everything that's involved there. And then here, with the ground cover, and why that's so important, because we're starting to see the robins come back now too. The leaves are super important for so many different animals because lots of things are living in the leaves. So you'll notice, and it's kind of funny to watch the robins right now too, is they're constantly throwing leaves around, even on really cold days, because there's so many insects building there, so they're looking for food right in there. And I just have another picture. I didn't take the picture where it's got like all the worms and caterpillars in there, but that's what it's doing right now. And you can see that out in your yards and along your trails right now here. So that's just kind of where I want to kind of set everybody's thinking. And if we look back at like the sugar maple ecology, or basically like what's going on with the sugar maples here. So this sugar maple, you can see it bucket, and there's other ones in the background. This is right on the trail at Moose Hill right here. But they're really, really important trees in most hardwood forests that are kind of wetter. So they have to be, it's strange. The soil has to drain really well, but it has to stay wet. So it can't stay soggy. So you're looking at kind of like the slopes near wetlands, you know, near streams, near other wetlands right through there. So it's going to be well drained, but also kind of stay nice and wet and moisture rich. They're really neat too because they're really good at being in the shade. So it's rare for a tree to be able to thrive in shade and in the sun, and the sugar maples do both. So they can be in the sunny areas and the shady areas. Also, you know, forests have different ages, like, you know, depending on how long they've been there for. So like here in this picture of this picture of the forest in Canton, this is a relatively young forest, and it's a young forest because it used to be farms. Okay, there used to be a sheep farm where it was in Canton, so there's lots of white pine trees in there because they come in earlier on. So it's characteristic of a younger forest in that case. And the sugar maples do really well in young forests that are kind of a medium age and an older age, and they do well in all of them. So they grow well in like these mixed age forests that are kind of wet but drain well. And then also for us, they're important for, you know, maple syrup, maple sugar production, and all of the really beautiful colors in the fall time too. So just to kind of give you a sense of where our sugar maples actually are, the whole green area is where the sugar maples are occurring in the United States and in Canada. So you can see it's northern United States and southeastern Canada here. You've got Minnesota, Michigan right through here, down to Tennessee, Missouri in this area. And the redder colors in this picture is where most of the sugar mapling is happening. So New York, Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. So last year, there were over 13 million sugar maple taps in the country. That's excluding Canada. Canada's a lot more. Canada, like Quebec and Ontario, produce a vast amount of sugar maple. Almost 6 million sugar maple trees were taps. Some trees can have 2 taps in it, so that could be 3 million trees instead of just 6 million, and 1.5 million gallons of syrup. New York had almost 3 million taps and almost 650,000 gallons of maple syrup, and then Maine is the 3rd largest producer at almost 2 million and almost 500,000 gallons of sap. Massachusetts had probably the best data I could get from Massachusetts, because it's a smaller production, is about 60 to 70,000 gallons in 2018. Yes?
The sap comes out, you have to treat it?
Yeah, I'll go through that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So why does the sap run? Like, why is this the really cool and important period right now? And so really simply, it's got to be the days where it's below freezing at night and above freezing during the day, and it has to fluctuate like that back and forth. So that's how long the season is. You know, so in January it's freezing during the day and at night. There's no maple syrup that's going to run. The sap is going to run. In February it's freezing below, you know, day and night. It's not going to run. It's when you get the days like in the 20s at night and 35 to 40 during the day, the trees start to warm up and the sap starts moving through the trees, and I'll go through how that's happening. So nights below freezing, days above freezing, and the 33 to 40 degrees is really, really ideal. When it stays too warm, the trees will shut down early if the leaves haven't started to come out yet, because there's not enough water in the system and for the pressures to move. And once the leaves start to peep out and the buds start to come out, the season's over, because then the sap tastes really funny, because now the sugars are being made by the leaves at that point too. And what I want to show here is just a little video here. So I'm going to see if this is loud enough here.
Maple tappers wait for the conditions.
Can everybody
to be
hear that, or is
just
that loud
right
enough?
in order for the trees.
So is that loud enough for everybody? You want me to turn it up? Turn it up a little bit? Okay.
Maple tappers wait for the conditions to be just right in order for the tree's sap to begin flowing.
Say you get a freezing night, it creates negative pressure in the tree. The roots will actually bring in more water at that point.
So at
The
night,
following day,
the
if
water
temperature
comes up.
rises above freezing.
The carbon dioxide in there will start to expand. It becomes positive pressure. It goes from sort of drawing up some water to then releasing it. And if you've put a small hole, pressure will be relieved, sap will flow out the tap hole.
And hopefully fill a conveniently placed bucket. Repeat this process throughout your sugar bush, which is neither sugar nor a bush, discuss among yourselves, and you should have gallons of sap.
It's mostly water, it's about 98% water, but it's got some sucrose in it.
Okay, and I'll talk about the sugar there. So it's really interesting, and I'm going to go through this because I just think it's kind of so neat and cool, and I'll show you the whole process that goes on here. So at nighttime, the water in the tree is going to freeze. So just picture like an ice crystal that you'll see on a walkway or anything like that. So it gets larger. If something frozen, just a straw, because think of a tree where you go a little past the bark, you've got areas where water's flowing and it's called sapwood, or the technical term xylem. You can kind of think of it also as like the little tubes in a celery stalk, but just a little bit smaller. Water's running up there the whole time. But if you froze it within a hard straw, the straw would kind of expand and burst, or not flex at all and would just freeze and push up. What's happening in the sugar maples and a few other trees as well, there's empty cavities. There's a little buffer space next to it, so the crystals can push into the empty buffer space and kind of bulge to create some pressure. So think of your vein when it beats a little bit, and that's what it means by negative pressure. As the ice starts to freeze, it's pushing the other sap up until then that freezes there as well too. So it's moving it through the whole tree. So when you saw that picture, it's actually moving it up into the tree at night before it freezes. And then as it starts, and then think if you were at the top of a tree, just right now, picture yourself on the top of a tree, and you move off the branch, you're going to fall out of the tree, right? Gravity, it's going to fall down. So when the ice actually melts during the daytime in the tree, the sap actually runs or falls down. That's the positive pressure that he's talking through there. So when it thaws, it actually just comes down into the tree, right through there. So at like nighttime, and I'll just walk through this because it's a little counterintuitive, the sap moves up from the roots up into the tree and freezes. And I'll just show you pictures of it because it's really kind of neat. As it thaws during the day, it comes down, and then that's where it's going to be filling into your bucket or into your glass or anything right here through there. And so here's the picture of it right here. So what I want to show right here is just picture this being, I apologize, it's a little pixelated, but picture this being the trunk of the tree right through here, and you're peeling it back into layers. You're peeling back the bark, you're peeling back a layer where sugars are going to run up, and that's not going to be happening when there's no leaves. And then you're picturing the darker wood, the sap wood right through here. That's where the water's running through the tree right through here. At night, the water runs up like this, and during the day when it warms up, the water falls down, and it's going to fall into the bucket right through here. And so freezing, thawing, freezing, thawing, freezing, thawing. And that's kind of how the cycle's working. So as you're doing this, you drill the hole into the tree like you saw my daughter do, and the hole goes in inch and a half. You don't want to go too deep, because if you go too deep into the center, you're hitting the heartwood area, and no water's flowing in the heartwood. No sap is flowing in the heartwood. And so what happens is, since these are all basically like subway tubes or blood vessels for the tree, I mean, they're not pumping or anything like that, it's just moving pipes, the water falls down. When it hits the tap hole, it goes right out like a spigot. They call it a spile, and then it goes right into a bucket. Or I'll show you with a tubing system right through there. And so just again, it freezes. I'll just draw it on the screen. So it freezes at night and pushes its way up. That's below freezing. And then when it thaws, it falls back down. Night freezes, going up, thaws back down, and that's where it's falling into the bucket or in the tubing system that you'll see. And here's just a little picture of what it looks like. This is an actual picture. This is a walnut tree, but it's very similar to a maple. That's what all the little holes look like, and that's at 25 times, magnification. But again, it's just all these little tubes with extra space into it. And then here it is again up closer. And that's actually a cross section. That's actually just a microscope picture of the tubes. And so when it freezes, it basically kind of pushes it out a little bit because there's extra space in there. And it's just kind of a really amazing way. And sugar maples and a few others are the trees that can do that. So when the sap starts to fall back to the roots, if it gets in the way of the tap hole, that's where the sap is actually coming out and filling up the bucket. And say if we have a day like this, and say maybe 3 of them, it'll fill the bucket up to about a gallon right through there. And then you take it and you boil it off, which I'm going to start looking at that process. Or what we have here, this is Vin, this is the property manager of Moose Hill. This is taking right in 2020 at the pandemic, right through here. And he's setting up a whole system of tubes, and it's collecting from like 20 or 30 taps from, say, 10 trees and going into a larger bucket in there. And then that's what's being brought into this boiling system right through here. And I'm going to show a video about that because it's a lot better to see than have me talk about it. And this is what
Dr.
happens
Abby
after you have the
Vandenberg
sap.
of the University of Vermont's Proctor Maple Research Center explains.
Simply need to concentrate that sap from 2% sugar, which is how it comes out of the tree, up to syrup density, which is about 67 or 66% sugar. And the traditional way to accomplish that is through heat-driven evaporation.
The sap is run through a series of pans, which not only boil off the water, but provide the syrup's trademark flavor.
Most of the flavor that develops in maple syrup develops as that sap is processed into syrup using heat in the evaporator. Things develop like sugar degradation products and Maillard reaction products.
Which also provides the syrup with its varying hues of amber and caramel. The final product is filtered, bottled, and sold with old-timey depictions of horses and sleighs and log cabins to give you that syrup.
So here's a picture of the evaporator at Moose Hill. So Vin and volunteers will collect the sap either from the buckets, and I'll show you some more videos of that tubing system in just a minute. That tubing system, there's then a retaining vat, about 300 gallons, I believe, that's right outside that pumps into the evaporators. It goes into the upper evaporator, and then as it starts to boil itself down, it comes into the lower evaporator. And as you can see, there's lots of water vapor in there. If we had wood lined up against this entire wall, you know, stacked, you go through about half the wall in a day to run these machines, to run the evaporator there. It goes through about a half a cord of wood a day, like an incredible amount to boil all this down. Because as you saw in that video, you're going from 98% water to 33% water. So think of if you've ever boiled off or reduced a tomato sauce or made a glaze when you're cooking or anything like that. You're concentrating the flavors by getting rid of the extra water. So what they're doing with the maple syrup is they're concentrating the maple sap to have more of that sugar. And you're looking at about 66% sugar in there. That's where the sucrose is. And the sugar maples are used is because they have a very high amount of sugar relative to water. 2% is actually high. A red maple might be 1.5% to 1%, and other trees are can be lower there too. So that's why they use sugar maples in this case. So when you're looking at the actual trees like this, the tree diameter, just in terms of like how this is working, it's got to be at least a foot. So that's about a 40-year-old tree. It's got to be about a foot wide, a foot in diameter to start tapping the tree right through here. And then, you know, once you get larger and larger, you can actually add more taps to the tree right there. And as you saw in the previous slide, as the sap fell down, the more taps that you have, the more areas that the sap's going to come out into the buckets right through there. And then how do you do the sugar creation, the sap creation again? We're using an evaporator, so it's basically boiling, and it's not boiled to 210 degrees. It's going to be boiled at 219 degrees, and that's a hard temperature. If you go a little bit too high or a little bit too low, it's basically you're not going to get rid of all the fungus and bacteria, so it'll get moldy when it's on the shelf. If you go above 219, that's when you're going to get the sugars crystallizing. So when you go a little bit higher, that's when you can get your maple sugar as opposed to your maple syrup. As you're going a little bit higher and higher, you can think of like maple syrup candies, maple sugar candies and stuff like that through there. And then in terms of just like the season of it here, and when we're looking at the seasons, you know, when the trees haven't budded out, you're good to go. You can do your maple sap collection to turn into sugar. Once the maple leaves start to bud out, the season ends because the flavor and taste of it all changes, because the goal of the leaves is to capture carbon dioxide and make sugars, so you have a lot more stuff flowing through the plants, and it changes the whole taste of it right through there. And then lastly, I mean, not lastly, but in terms of like the maple syrup colors, you kind of go through golden, really lighter yellow colors through darker colors. you know, the first few days of the sap collection, and when that's boiled down, it's going to be a milder flavor, and that's when you get the more golden in color. And then as you move farther into the season, you're going to get kind of that amber and richer color, and then at the very end, you're going to get a much darker color, and that's one of the lower grade ones, but it's very flavorful and is used an awful lot of the times in baking, right through there. And then I wanted to show you the tubing system here.
Commercial maple syrup producer would be putting taps up with tubing. Basically, it looks like little tributaries, and they would either be gravity fed to a collection barrel, or if it was in a flat area, they would actually use a vacuum system.
A vast number of the maple operations are using tubing and vacuum sap collection and things that also might not quite fit with that sort of bucolic rural image.
And if plastic and pumps.
Okay. So in this picture right here, what we started in 2018 at Moose Hill is instead of using buckets in all the cases, we still use buckets. Instead of using buckets in all the cases, we're collecting it through a system of tubes going to a central collection area. And because it's a more closed system, you're losing a lot less sap and the trees are more productive. You're able to get about double the amount of sap out of the trees through that part of it. And I just want to stop here before I keep going to see if anybody has any questions so far or comments. Yes?
Do they use one of the older tap holes? Do they use them over again, or do you have to, drill a new one every year?
So the question is about, do you use the older tap holes or do you drill a new one every year? So right here. So you want to drill a new one every year, and sometimes you might drill multiples on the same tree. You do it about body height up through here, because that's like a wound in the tree. The reason you do the 12 inches or greater in diameter for the trees is because they're healthy enough, and that's not going to be a negative. It's not going to hurt the tree by doing that. But the tree, once you start doing that, it's going to start healing itself over time. It's going to seal itself up. So you're going to drill a new tap hole every year, and you won't use, you can go back to a sugar maple and see all the old tap holes in there. You wouldn't use an old tap hole either, because it's going to basically, like, you have scar tissue. The tree's going to scar it to protect it from that wound. Yes?
How many weeks long is the season?
So the season can vary depending on the freeze-thaw cycle. A good year will be about 4 to 6 weeks. 2 years ago, when the season was a little bit shorter, because it just got, how it can get warm really quickly now, it was 3 weeks, so that it can fluctuate greatly, depending on the seasonality of it right here. And that's one thing, if people have questions in terms of like climate change and stuff too, I'll show you like this. So here's a graph right here that just talks about, the temperatures. This is below freezing and this is above freezing. And so what you want to see here is the temperature is going above and below, above and below. Once it goes to staying above and you're in spring and the leaves come out, it's all done. And what we're seeing happening here, and you can see this just with your gardens, the seasons are not only getting earlier, and I'll just show you in this graphic right here, as it starts to move a little bit. Not only are the seasons getting earlier, the fluctuations are much greater now. So it's much more stressful for the sugar maples. And just think about when you see things, this year it seems to be a bit more stable than before, but you can have a freeze-thaw cycle that's dramatically different, where things are blooming in February, and then a frost comes in March or April, kills everything that started growing. Like you've seen this happen with magnolia buds coming out, or leaves, and then those leaves die. The tree's got to spend all this more energy coming back out to produce new leaves or anything like that. So like the variability in the seasons is going to really hurt the sugar maples going forward too. Not just the changes in temperature, it's the stronger, much warmer in February, then all of a sudden you're back freezing in March, much warmer in April, like that. And I can talk about stress on the trees there too. But so that's the season. Where you're looking at something like this, like that. Any other questions that I left out? Because I want to talk about I want to bring it back to birds a little bit. Okay. So has anybody ever had like bird-friendly coffee? Or have you ever heard of bird-friendly coffee? So that's okay. With bird-friendly coffee, and there's also bird-friendly maple syrup production that I want to talk about right through here, and that's why I started off like this. The coffee plantations are managed not just for getting the most coffee out, they're managed to also for the local ecosystems and more friendly for, in this case, for birds. And so what that means is they're planting the coffee bushes in the forest, with trees and other plants and plants that are around, so it supports more animals through that. For example, in Guatemala, where I get some coffee from, they have 350 species of birds that use that coffee plantation. And the coffee plantation that's nearby that doesn't manage for birds and manage for the habitat, there's 50 species of birds. So there's 300 more species of birds at this where the coffee that I get comes from than other similar plantations really close by. And so I just want to talk about like bird-friendly maple syrup production is something that Mass Audubon's working on in the state and is also happening here. And that's why I wanted to bring back to the picture. Here's the barred owl. The first time I gave a talk here, there were orioles singing right in the parking lot that I saw. So this oriole is a migratory bird that is one of my favorite birds right through here. I also took this picture in a parking lot too, over in Mansfield. So we come back to the lots of different trees, shrubs, and other plants. So not only do you have sugar maples, but you have other trees and shrubs and plants. And if we looked again, what's in the photograph here with the downed and decaying wood, with the chickadee and the Carolina wren. So it's got, downed and decaying wood, a lot of dominant trees from the picture, ferns, leaves, and an understory of a lot of different plants. If we look back to the oriole that we have in the screen, but think of having a forest in a sugar maple operation where you're not only planting just sugar maples in the field, okay? And think of all the impacts of the deer where there's basically, you look in the forest and there's nothing on the ground right through here. So if you've got lots of sugar maples and other trees in here, that's great. And then if you have other layers of vegetation, so you actually have seedlings and saplings of trees, but you have blueberry bushes, you have American chestnuts, you have other plants that are there. You have flowering plants, you have ferns, you have the dead wood so the birds can nest in it. These are all really important, and they're really important for lots of migratory birds and our native birds, like our chickadees, to nest in there. So at Moose Hill, and we're moving to do this even more, where we have blueberries, we have other plants on the ground, we're not getting rid of leaves, where we have other trees in the sugar bush that's going on there. There's a lot more birds that are nesting here. This is an oven bird. This says teacher, teacher, teacher in the spring, and this is around Walpole. I've heard it here right along the rail trail, right behind us, right through here. This nests in our sugar maple operation at Moose Hill because we have a lot of other diversity in the plants. Has anybody ever seen this bird? This is a bird that nests around here too, but it's rare. This is a scarlet tanager. It's even redder and blacker than this when you can actually see it. This will nest over in the sugar maple operation at Moose Hill because we have a lot of other plants, and the way we manage the land is a lot greater through here. The barred owl that you saw that I showed you earlier nests over there as well too. There's other little birds like these vireos. And there's this woodpecker. This is a downy woodpecker. And this one I like too because if you see here, see how the branch is wet? It's actually drinking the maple sap that's running out of the tree where the tree branch is actually broken right through here. So a lot of birds will actually come and drink the sap, and they'll actually come eat a lot of insects that are on the sap. And then this is only 10 minutes away. This bird is a pileated woodpecker, and this nests in the sugar bush that's over there. And so what I mean in terms of like bird-friendly, like bird-friendly maple syrup, it's the whole idea of not just trying to get the most out of the sugar maple trees. It's looking at also having a really robust ecosystem and kind of a set of network that is there to support lots of plants and animals there as well. Because if you look at a picture like this, so here's a sugar bush from Missouri. I apologize, I'm not sure why it's pixelated, but you can see here there's nothing underneath it right here, and they're just all sugar maples. So that you only have sugar maple trees right through here. You don't have this kind of robust ecosystem that you see in these cases right here. So what happens here and in other cases, and I just want to kind of show this, you can actually have strong impacts of a lot of different stresses on the sugar maple trees, and there could be drought or, you know, different nutrients being depleted. But I want to look at insects right through here, and I want to talk about like kind of insects. Think of one like the gypsy moths, or if you have cucumbers or you have squash, how an insect can just wipe everything out pretty quickly, or they can eat the whole canopy through there. You know, like if you've ever had a garden and all of a sudden like the insect has eaten most of your plant, it can be very frustrating through that. So if you just have sugar maples or anything right through there, they can be decimated by insects in that case. It could be any type of outbreak right through there. But if you have a diversity of tree species and layers of vegetation, you have lots of things that are there. So you're actually going to have more insects in that case, right? But if you have more birds and more other wasps and other things that are eating the insects, you're actually going to have a much lower, the trees will get hurt a lot less by the insects because you've got everything is eating each other, and you've got a much more stable foundation of an ecosystem because you're managing for a more robust ecosystem and it's more connected. So you're not going to need to use pesticides. You're not going to need to use other things to control it. It's naturally controlled because it's fitting into a broader web of the ecosystem. And when it's fitting into there, you're going to have more birds, you're going to have more of the animals. So when I say like the key point is there are much more species and total numbers of insects, but a much greater diversity of predators that are eating them, like birds, wasps, mammals, and more. So the pressure caused by the insects, like those outbreaks, is much lower in the sugar maples, and the sugar maples are a lot healthier because then you also have like natural fertilizer, the leaves are recycling, everything's kind of working together there, and you need much less outside inputs like fertilizer or pesticides or anything like this. And that doesn't relate just to, say, sugar maples. It relates to many other different operations. You know, when you have a, you know, if you have a monoculture, you know, just a huge corn crop as far as the eye can see, you have to kill the insects that are eating that with pesticides because there might be plenty of food there for a week or two when the corn is coming up. But for 50 other weeks of the year, the birds have nothing to eat in that field, just as an example through there. But here, when you've got a high diversity of plants in there, the birds have plenty of things to eat through there. So when the stuff's eating the sugar maples, stuff's eating the other things, they can move around. They're not relying on one type of crop through there. So the sugar maples are actually healthier and grow better when there's more things that are growing there. And that kind of ties into the bird-friendly maple syrup through there. But what I'd be happy to do now is I'd be happy to talk about this more and take any questions. And thank you very much for your kind attention. Yeah, yeah. And I can also talk about climate change impacts too if you'd like, but I don't want to leave time for questions.
One question.
Yeah.
Use the word pileated.
Yes.
What's that mean?
I'm not sure. Yeah. I can look it up. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I knew it one time and it flew out of my head. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
I've seen it go
Yeah,
but I never
yeah.
knew.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you sell Moose Hills maple syrup up there?
We do, yeah. Yeah. I could even bring some here to drop it off. I just forgot to bring it today. Yeah, I was at the training. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
your phone number? I'm gonna call you to remember.
Sure.
I'm just joking.
Sure. Here.
No, you're not. I love pancakes, and so I would love some.
There it is. It's on the screen. Yeah. Yeah, no, I just forgot to bring some by. Yeah, but I'd be more than happy if people wanted maple syrup, just let Debbie know. Let me know how much and I can bring it over. I think the 8-ounce one is $12 and then there's a smaller maple leaf one that's I think $8. Yeah. Yep. And the gift shop's open at Moose Hill Wednesday through Sunday, 9 to 4, and there's plenty of it there. Yep, and it'll be fresh this year.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
Could you talk about the different grades?
Sure. Sure, and that comes down to the color. So I'll go back to that. And so, let me just find that picture. Okay. So when you see like the premium, like grade A type of stuff, that's where you're looking at like the lighter colors. The light golden color isn't as flavorful. It's coming from the first couple of days of the sap where the sugar content is a little bit different, but that's like the fancy grade A or grade A plus or premium right through there. When you get into this color right here, like the amber color, you're looking at A as well there too when you see that. And then B is going to be this slightly darker color. And then C is going to be C and below. Well, I think it just goes to C. C is going to be that extra dark color that you're getting at the very end of the season, which isn't usually used for sale. So the dark and very dark colors are typically used in baking and other purposes through there, but they have a much richer, more mapley taste. So some people love it. Like everybody at Moose Hill loves the very, very dark colors that they don't sell, and they keep it basically in a milk jug in the fridge and use it all throughout the year to flavor not just pancakes, but lots of coffee and lots of other things in there. But that's a really basic with the grades.
Store that in the cold, or could you store it in the warm area?
You could when it's sealed and not opened, you can leave it out on the shelf. When you open it, you should probably keep it in the fridge in case anything else gets into it. Yeah. Yep. Yes.
Does the price vary according to color?
The lighter color is typically more expensive.
The lighter color?
The lighter color is typically more expensive. Yeah, that's where you get the higher grades.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yes.
Just maple sugar and date. Do you know how it first originated?
So it's likely there's strong evidence that First Nations, Native Americans in New York, southeastern Canada were doing maple sugaring of some sort, because the sugar, specifically not the syrup, but the sugar specifically, can last forever. Sugar was hard to come by, so it was a really good source of sugar. And then in Quebec and French trappers, and then also European settlements, they started maple sugaring late 1500s, early 1600s as well too. But it's a North American, specifically northeastern North American foundation is where it started, because that's where the trees are with the higher sugar content in the sugar maples. Okay. Well, thank you for. Oh yeah, sure.
So you're saying that most of this is all done around here. So you go across the country, like to Washington State, Alaska, and Oregon, and they have a lot of winters and all that. So that wouldn't happen there.
No, the sugar maples aren't there, so they're not. So
Because of the cold, or?
because that's not their native range.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's different trees that are there. People also tap beeches and birches and other walnuts. Well, it'd be beech syrup or birch syrup and stuff like that. So they have different flavors and tastes to it. The sugar maple is typically, you're seeing it basically predominantly east of the Mississippi River and up through here with Michigan, Wisconsin. And what's happening too, as the temperatures are warming and the season gets more variable, it's likely that it's gonna keep going more and more north, because because the seasons won't be commercially viable to run. Because if you only get a week of time where the sap's running, you're not gonna be able to collect enough to make the syrup. Yeah. Canada should be good for a long time. Massachusetts is pretty, in this area is at a pretty high risk, because when you lose that freeze-thaw cycle, or like those really cold winters, the sugar maple stresses go much higher. So combining that with drought, more variability in the earlier seasons, they're going to have a hard time hanging on. Then also the sugar content can actually change in the trees as well too. So what was 5 or 10 years ago where you needed 40 or 50 gallons, you might need 45 to 55 gallons to get the same amount too. Yes?
Do you see much of it in different parts of the world, and where do you see more?
It's only in eastern North America, right up here. So,
Not in France?
nope, the trees just aren't there.
Okay.
They might be able to do it with beeches and other trees, but the sugar maples are northeastern United States and southeastern Canada. Yep.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you tell a sugar maple from a non-sugar maple tree?
So simple things here, especially in the winter time, when you're looking at the trees, in this case and in here, I don't have a slide that has the identification, but I can show you in a handout in my bag. I think I have it. The bark is going to be kind of a little bit of this wavy, peely bark right through here. The maples that give you the brightest colors in the fall too are either going to be a sugar maple or a red maple, where you get those really rich oranges and red colors right through here. But the bark is really, really helpful at this time of year. Once you start to see, once somebody shows you what the sugar maple looks like compared to other bark, it's pretty easy to tell right through there. So the bark's really helpful at this time of year. Plus the ones that come with buckets. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's also differences in the twigs and the leaves, but it's you know, it's better to see, and I just don't have it up to show you. Yeah. Yes.
You were going to play the song of one of the birds at the beginning.
Oh, which one did I say? The Carolina wren, was it? Yeah, hold on. So here are some birds that you can hear right now. So let me play a few, actually, since we have it. So this one wasn't in the talk, but actually tufted titmouses, they nest in tree cavities like the chickadees do too, as well. But the reason I have this one up here, this was a talk I gave yesterday about kind of winter and spring. You're hearing this right now, and if you want to learn bird songs, especially right now, you know, start with one, you know, that you can that's kind of common and constant. And this one is one of the best birds to learn right now, because starting it around New Year's Day and really starting January 15th to February 4th, they're calling all the time right now. And it's a simple call. It's Peter, Peter, Peter. It's like 3 whistles. Let me turn it down a little. So it's kind of like, sorry, then it goes into alarm calls. It's basically Peter, 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 like that. And here's a video of it doing it. Oh, I'm going to connect to the internet. There's not a video of it doing it. Okay? Anyway, I'll show you the video, but what you're hearing is, and they're calling during the day, which a lot of birds mostly call in the mornings, and you can hear them a lot. I actually heard one when I got out of the car. I've just trained I just kind of recognize it as like, you know, like you might see when you wave to a neighbor. Like I hear it, and I really like it too, because it tells me in January when I might be running in the morning and it's freezing out, at least in a month from now, it's going to be nicer. And so what it's doing, and what that Peter, Peter, Peter is, and it'll play again, they're just advertising to other mates, or they're telling other males, like, I'm better than you, come with me, stuff like that. They're setting up those territories. And because it's those 3 whistles, in a way, it's a simple thing to hear. The other one you might mix it up with a little bit is the cardinal, but that's the only other one there. And it's a common, simpler call where once you can start like, oh, I know that's probably the tufted titmouse, then you can start to put that in like something I know versus like everything else, as opposed to where everything sounds like noise. Before I started looking at bird songs, like thinking about it more, everything was just noise. A bird song was a bird song. I couldn't place them. And it helps when you have something kind of easy to do with that, and the Peter, Peter, Peter works well. But the song that I said I was going to play was the Carolina wren. This is a really loud and bold bird, and it does really well in yards, in neighborhoods. It'll nest in walls. It'll attack all the other birds that are around there. It's really small. It's very aggressive. If you've ever had a bird nesting in your garage, it's probably this one if you're getting in your house. But here this one is.
Carolina wren.
So kind of that continuous call, and I'm telling you, there'll be people in this room that'll hear this a couple of times when you leave today.
Carolina wren.
So you know, a complex but very repeating song, and it's very loud. It's a very loud bird, just like the tufted titmouse, which you'll see here. But those were the 2 birds that I was talking about.
Does the Carolina wren return to the exact same nesting spot?
The Carolina wren is a resident, so it'll be in the same area and will probably nest in the same spot or similar spots every year. Yeah. So it doesn't migrate, it just...
Drilled a hole in the house, and I'm afraid to block it for fear he just goes over a foot and drills another hole, so I'm leaving it open.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So will they come to the exact same hole, or?
It probably depends, yeah. I'm not sure.
I know he did 2 years in a row, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's.
Sorry, I got something in my throat. It could come back, or it could use something nearby. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Probably doesn't tie in with this. We have a neighbor that maybe 10 years, not even 10, 5 or 7 years ago, had the side of his house.
Gonna get a little water.
attacked by
Yep.
birds that drilled
Attacked by
holes
birds drilled. Yep.
Right down the thing that was this big, holes right through the shingles and everything. I can't remember how it all came out. He's still there.
Yeah. So it's probably a woodpecker if it's drilling holes through it. Yeah. It would have to be. When I showed the picture of the chickadee coming out, that was already partially drilled. That's like a really rotted birch tree or something you see on the water. And it'll excavate it, but it's got to be really soft. The ones that are normally doing like what you're talking about, that wouldn't be, the Carolina wren might use the hole, but it's not drilling the hole. Its face and skull isn't built for that. The woodpecker basically has a foam for a skull, so when it almost looks like it's wearing its own helmet inside. So when it's hitting the wood over and over again, it's not giving itself a concussion every single time. Those are the ones that are going to be doing like the drilling. Their skull's built for it. I'm just seeing I have a picture of one through here. I don't think I do. So if you block that up and it's nearby, I wouldn't be surprised if they try and just drill nearby. But in the springtime, they're also drumming to attract mates, and they're just hammering on things, whether or not they want to nest in there. It can also indicate there might be bugs, like beetle, like larvae, like caterpillars or grubs in the wood, and they're trying to eat them. Or like carpenter ants or something like that, too. Yes?
I had a friend when I lived in Westwood, and she had a big, beautiful house, and it was tan in color, and they had a woodpecker that put so many holes in the back of their house, they had to have it re-sided.
Yeah.
And he came back, you know, he kept coming back.
Yeah.
Casing house.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, it sounds right for them, and you know, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, birds can be funny. Especially trying to outthink them. You know, can be be very frustrating. Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And I'll stick around if you have any other questions.